Dying Light gets a big patch. When will the next Xbox event be? And Phil Spencer talks about having a consistent release schedule with Xbox Game Studios games. Alright guys, before we get into this video, I have partnered with Ridge Wallet to show you these awesome wallets that they provide. Very thin, very durable, hold all of your cards as well as your cash, and it's completely replaced my previous wallets, those big bulky leather ones. The leather stretches, it hurts your butt when you sit down, and they just take up a lot of space. And I have to say, since partnering with them and using this wallet, I've been extremely impressed. And if you are looking for just a super slick, easy to use wallet, you can actually use my code right now on ridge.com/Plume Network and type in the coupon code Plume Network and you'll get 15% off. So make sure to go check out Ridge Wallet if you love super slick, super awesome wallets that, I mean, just completely replace your current leather wallet and are much easier to handle. So Dying Light 2 came out back in February. It had a bunch of different modes for the Xbox Series X, but on the Xbox Series S, it was locked at 30 frames per second. And there was a lot going around as to why this was the reason. Why couldn't they reduce the resolution, scale the game down so that you could get 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series S? We've seen this happen from other games that look as good, better. They are bigger than Dying Light. A game that I'm playing right now, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Dawn of Ragnarok, runs in a very smooth 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series S. So seeing that they had locked Dying Light 2 to 30 frames per second was interesting. I thought that there was no reason why they had to do that other than they may have not had time to fully optimize the game for the Series S. Now, what made matters worse was this guy here, Timon Smektala, who is the Dying Light 2 lead designer, was asked about future updates and if they were going to be bringing things like 60 frames per second to the Xbox Series S. And he had this as a response: "We're fixing the co-op issues first. The demand broke Sony, Microsoft, and Epic servers. Motion sickness will be addressed in the first upcoming patch. Field of view plus motion blur will be considered for the next. 30 frames per second on Series S will be looked at, but the console's GPU is holding us back." And a lot of people read that as, that's it, that's the proof. Going into the next generation, the Xbox Series S is going to continue to hold back next gen games because it's just too weak of a console. That GPU isn't great enough, and developers are going to have to make lots of concessions with it. But you sit back, you look at what came previously to that, you look at games like I said, Assassin's Creed Valhalla, Doom Eternal, even the Call of Duty franchise games that go up to like 120 frames per second. Developers have been able to easily get 60 frames per second out of the Series S by scaling their games, making them have no ray tracing, maybe reducing the resolutions, having that dynamic resolution like 900s, like 1080p, all that type of stuff. Other developers have proven that the Series S can run games at 60 frames per second, meaning that reading this was confusing, especially to me. I first initially thought the reason why Series S was at 30 frames per second for Dying Light 2 was just because the developers just weren't able to optimize it properly in time for the release of the game. So they made sure to lock that 30 frames per second, so at least you still had a stable experience when playing the game on launch. And it looks like that seems to be the case as they have released a patch which is going to be bringing over the 60 frames per second performance mode to the Xbox Series S. So that's great to see because the Xbox Series S is an awesome machine for the price that you're paying for it. It can play games at 60 frames per second. The developers just need to know how to utilize it properly, I guess, and optimize their games properly, scaling the graphics within their games to make sure that you're getting that 60 frames per second. It's awesome for first-person shooters, some of them going up to 120 FPS. And I think as we continue to move through this generation with the more technology that the developers utilize, the more RDNA 2 stuff, the machine learning, the AI upscaling, we're going to see games even run at higher resolutions at 60 frames per second on the Xbox Series S. And I'm not a developer, but when you see a lead designer or a developer say something like the GPU is holding the development of a game back in terms of getting it to the 60 frames per second, it's very hard to always believe that based off what we've seen in the past from other games that have released and are able to hit that target. And obviously with Dying Light 2, they just needed more time to be able to hit that target, and they were able to figure it out, which overall is just going to improve the experience of the game. All right, let's jump over here to some more information about a potential E3 style showcase coming from Xbox in June. So we've heard lots of conflicting reports about this. Last week, we were hearing that they may hold something in May, but May is so close to June, and that's when E3 was, and E3 is still kind of up in the air, but now there are more rumors going around that E3 isn't going to be canceled at all. We will still have that digital event. Specifically, this comes via Tom Henderson, who tweeted out E3 will be an entirely digital event this year, according to the ESRB, who sent out emails to developers today. I guess this squashes the rumors that they were going to cancel it. I'd be expecting an announcement soon if the ESRB is sending out emails. So there you go. I mean, people were thinking it could potentially be canceled, but it looks like, based off of what Tom Henderson is saying here, they should be announcing the official dates and the official information for an all digital E3 very soon, which would make sense for Xbox to now hold an event in June, specifically at the E3 event, which they've been doing forever. They did it last year. It was a huge show, the Xbox and Bethesda showcase, and I wouldn't be surprised if they go along those routes again. Now, Jeff Grubb has also touched on this, saying, I'll probably have more to say on this soon, but it's in June, not May. And he's referring to the next Xbox event, continuing saying, well, they might do something in May or September, I don't know, but I know they're planning on an E3 style show in June. They're talking to partners to get big names in there. That is going on right now, and it's March. So it's not like they can change that train or turn that big ship around. They are heading in that direction, and they're going to do something in that time frame. So that will mean if E3 is officially going to happen, they're going to be doing that event in June as the Xbox and Bethesda showcase, most likely to coincide with the E3 show. So I'm looking forward to that, because we haven't had an Xbox show really since last year. And we have the ID at Xbox show coming up this week, but we haven't seen or heard really too much more information on those big first-party Xbox Game Studios games. And the community, everyone in gaming, is wanting to see more, because Xbox has so many games in the works. They announced a bunch, they've showed off a bunch, and now we need to see, I guess, the fruits of their labor, in the way that is all the investment that Phil Spencer, Xbox, has done to turn the ship around, get all of these first-party studios into Xbox Game Studios. Is it going to pay off? I think it will. I don't think there's really any too much doubt about that, especially if you've seen what has happened in 2021 with Halo Infinite and Forza Horizon 5, but those were two established IPs with two established studios. Now we need to see what all of these acquisitions are going to bring, what a new studio like The Initiative is going to do with Perfect Dark, and that's what's really exciting going forward, and hopefully they show us some of that at this next upcoming event. Now, speaking of Xbox Game Studios and providing a steady flow of games, a steady flow of information about what is coming from Xbox Game Studios, Phil Spencer was on the Xbox Era podcast this past week, and he actually touched on this, and this is something he has talked about before. He has said stuff similar to this before, but he went on to say this: we do have a lot of great games in development. We want to get to this point where there's a steady flow of great games that are coming, that our customers can predict. We're going through right now, and we don't have a big game this quarter. So Matt Booty and the teams and the ZeniMax teams want to get to that point where we really have a great on-ramp for our platform and games that people can get excited about on a regular basis. And I think that's very important for Xbox to eventually get around to, and I'm hoping within the next year or so we get to that point. I would say this is potentially the last year where I think they can really get a pass that there isn't a big Xbox Game Studio game every 3 to 4 months, especially with the amount of studios they have under Xbox Game Studios. And I do think starting next year we will see a lot more consistency in terms of releasing a game between January and March, or January and April, and then in the springtime, in the summertime, and then in the holiday season you'll have probably the biggest title of them all. For example, with this year, with the release of Starfield, And Phil Spencer has talked about this many times. They want to be releasing games every 3 to 4 months, and they definitely have the power to do that with the studios that they have, with the amount of resources that they have. And there are so many games in development. It's just about having all these games ready and then deciding what the best window is to release them all. And like, you think about, just off the top of my head, we have Starfield coming out this year, Redfall coming out this year, and then after that we're going to have things like Avowed, The Outer Worlds 2, State of Decay 3, the next Fable, and there's so many games, like so many of these other Bethesda games that are in the works as well that are coming out. We hear about all the other ones from Obsidian, the smaller projects that they're working on the side. You have Hellblade 2. So there's tons of content. It's just about a matter, when are they going to start coming out on a consistent basis? So there's never really a dead time within Xbox Game Studios where people can sit back and say, hey, we haven't gotten a new game in a long time. That's it for me, guys. What are your thoughts on the Dying Light 2 patch, specifically getting the 60 FPS on the Xbox Series S? What do you think Xbox is going to do for their next show? Are they just going to do their own thing, or are they just going to incorporate it into E3 once it officially gets announced? And the release schedule for Xbox Game Studios, what do you want to see out of their release schedule? If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that thumbs up button. You're new here, you liked what you saw, consider hitting that subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll catch you in the next video.
Bye.